People have always loved a good competition. It taps into our innate and primal drive to excel and outperform, surely firmly rooted in our evolutionary history when competition was key to survival. Today, we see competition in our everyday lives nearly everywhere, just in different ways, like academics, bake-off television shows, and the perpetual pursuit of keeping up with the Joneses. Overall, competition has made the shift from survival to entertainment, but there are certain points in history that showcase competition on a larger and grander scale. Take the space race, for example, when the US and Soviet Union vied to be the first to make notable leaps in space exploration and travel. It was a competition on a global scale that we are all familiar with. But not so long before that, another great race was underway, one in which countries sent team after team to the most northern and southern reaches of the world, all in hopes to earn the designation as the first to plant their flag on the top and bottom of the planet. Most failed, many died, and others disappeared in their pursuits, leaving the rest of the world disappointed, heartbroken, and left with enduring questions. But some, thought to be lost forever, were eventually found, and what they left behind holds mysteries that have yet to be solved today. Welcome to National Park After Dark.
Hi everyone, welcome back. This is Cassie.
And this is Danielle. I just did the intro. Welcome.
In case you don't know our voices yet, or it's your first time listening.
Yeah, and if this is your first one, congrats, because I'm not trying to set the bar high or anything right off the bat, but I'm going to say this is like top 2 or 3 episodes I've ever researched.
Wow, okay. I'm really
unexpectedly
excited because I don't know too much about what you're doing today, but you have told me how much you've been working hard on this episode, and your intro already has me with a lot of questions.
Okay, well, I started with intentions of, because this is coming out when we are actually going to be physically in Antarctica. So if you're listening to this on the day it's released, Cassie and I are freezing somewhere at the bottom of the world. And
I'm thriving, but
yeah,
hopefully I'm not seasick. Hopefully I'm thriving.
I think by now you'll be like, have your sea legs a little bit, hopefully.
Okay.
But yeah, so when I was pre-planning doing this, I was thinking of like, let's do some sort of Antarctic story to correlate with that. And that was my intention, but I wound up on the other side of the world and the other pole. So we're going to be in the Arctic region today for this story. And it was one that I thought was going to be kind of like a quick and lighthearted and fun and quirky episode, but it is far from that. And I am so excited with the way it turned out. So we can get right into it. But the only announcement is really we have no new episode next week. Sad.
Yeah, I know. Each year we take 2 weeks off.
How dare we?
First of all. And yeah. And
yes.
We're sorry. But
apologies.
We're also excited because
bye.
A week off is great. We'll miss you dearly. And there are so many episodes. Like if you are first tuning in, we have a backlog of so many episodes that go back, listen to them if you haven't heard them yet. Also, if you're not on our Outsiders page, if you're not part of our Patreon or Outsiders subscription on Apple, we have a ton of bonus content on there, from Trail Tales to monthly bonus episodes. So if you're going to miss us next week, you have options. We're around for sure.
In perpetuity, unfortunately. Like our voices will live on.
For all time, as long as Spotify and Apple exist.
Things.
All the stupid things we said will always be on.
Think about that. You're fortunate if you don't have a podcast. Anyway, okay. So this, let's get into it. That was it, right? That was all.
Yeah.
Alrighty. If anyone was to get stage fright, this would be the place for it. It was February 13th, 1895, and 40-year-old Solomon August André was standing in front of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, a group founded in 1739 and comprised of the world's foremost leaders in science, engineering, mathematics, and exploration. Squeaks of the wooden chairs could be heard as everyone settled into their seats. Silence fell over the group of men as they gathered to hear what André had to say, as the tall, blond, strongly built man took the stage. Clearing his throat, he began. The history of geographical discovery is at the same time a history of great peril and suffering. He went on to describe the obstacles explorers face while on expeditions in various places around the world, and also all of the means by which they overcame said obstacles, usually relying on the land for food, water, and shelter. However, he noted, in the Arctic, circumstances were very different. The cold kills. There are no places to rest, no vegetation, no fuel. He described the Arctic ice fields as an inviting journey, but one fraught with imposing challenges. This information was not new to the Academy. The earliest explorations of the Arctic dated back to the Vikings, and by the late 19th century, newspapers around the world had carried stories of European and North American countries all venturing to the polar regions of the world for decades, all in a race to map and leave their mark on the top and bottom of the world. Of course, today we recognize that the Arctic was home to dozens of groups of indigenous peoples for thousands of years prior to that point in time, but that was ignored largely at this time in history. For most, if not all, of the countries involved in this great race, such as Denmark, Russia, England, Finland, and the United States, sending expeditions to the most northern and southern extreme locations on the planet was almost a rite of passage and a great source of national pride, especially if they were the first to reach an uncharted destination or map an unknown corner of the world.
This is kind of reminding me of a podcast episode that I listened to. And I know this is going in a totally different direction, but just the way that you're talking about exploring the North and the South Poles. I listened, it was on Dirtbag Diaries, and they did an expedition to find the southernmost tree in the world. And so they went off of the coast of Argentina, and they started heading off to islands south of there going towards Antarctica. And I don't remember the name of the island that they went to, but the whole expedition was just to find the southernmost tree, to see where that tree could grow that far south. And they did find it. I don't remember the island, but it was a really interesting, I listened to it years ago, so I don't remember the full details, but it's reminding me of just these explorations to find just things that people haven't seen before and haven't touched before, and that episode in particular I thought was really interesting. And
do you remember what like species of tree it was by chance?
No, no. If I knew I was going to be talking about this, I would have looked it up. I guess.
So you're gonna just leave us all hanging.
Well, let me look it up real quick.
You're like, I don't know where it was or what it was, but it's out there.
I know there's a picture of it. Oh, here it is. It is the world's southernmost tree is a Magellan's beech tree on Isla Hornos, also known as Cape Horn in Chile.
A what? Probably Magellan, right? Because Magellan was a famous explorer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did I say?
Magellan.
Oh. Yeah, Magellan.
Speaking of having a podcast and being wrong a lot.
Being wrong, yeah. Yeah, it says Magellan beech tree in Isla Hornos in Cape Horn, Chile.
Cool.
The tree is about 42 years old, 2 meters long, and bent horizontally at 57 centimeters above the ground.
Well, now everyone has a trivia question answer.
Now you all know.
Yeah, now you know.
I've tried about everything to improve my sleep. Setting a stricter bedtime, trying to avoid screens an hour before bed, which, let's be real, never works, and even kicking my pets out of bed, though that's always a battle I lose, and don't try that hard to fight. But no matter what I do, I just can't seem to get the restful sleep that I need. But what if I told you there's one simple change that can actually make a real difference in how you sleep? It's not about counting sheep or forcing yourself to wind down earlier. It's about upgrading your sheets. Boll & Branch's 100% organic cotton sheets are a game changer. From the moment you climb into bed, you'll feel like you're being wrapped in luxury. The softness is next level, and the best part, these sheets help you fall asleep faster because they're breathable, so you're never too hot or too cold. And unlike other sheets, these get even softer with every wash. So imagine spending every night in sheets that just keep getting better. They also have bed blankets, duvets, and quilts that will make your bed feel like you're sleeping on a cloud. Boll & Branch offers a 30-night guarantee so you can try them for a month with zero risk. Wash them, sleep in them, and if they don't transform the way you sleep, you can send them back for a full refund. Now here's the chance to change the way you sleep with Boll & Branch. Get 15% off plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com/NPAD. That's Boll and Branch, BOLLAND branch.com/NPAD to save 15%. Exclusions apply. See site for details.
Despite the various expeditions sent to the Arctic, one country was falling a bit short on gaining ground, and that was Sweden. They had sent some smaller teams, and they did have some involvement in other countries' expedition teams, like individuals from Sweden would join them. But their designation as a northern country and the success of their neighbor, Norway, had really pushed them to want to make their own unique mark. So that's why when Andre described a totally new, revolutionary way of mapping, photographing, and reaching locations no team had ever been to, namely the geographic North Pole, they all paid attention. Sledge teams led by dogs or men had only gotten so far, and ships had a tendency to be slow-moving, get trapped and crushed by sea ice, or go missing entirely. Glances were thrown around the room. Without having to name it explicitly, the group knew to which expedition Andre was referring. Nearly 50 years prior, an expedition team led by British explorer Sir John Franklin had vanished. All 129 men and their ships had disappeared, and no one had heard from them since. Andre had set the scene and laid out the problems only to offer a solution. Quote, "The time has come, gentlemen, to seek out other means of transport. We need not pursue the investigation very far to discover such a means, one that appears to be created for the purpose in question. I refer to the balloon." The crowd reacted with mixed emotions. Some scoffed while others sat forward, intrigued. Balloons were, at the time, cutting-edge technology.
Like a hot air balloon?
Yes. Hot air balloons were first demonstrated in front of King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette by the Montgolfier brothers, who sent a sheep, a duck, and a chicken into the air. Months later, satisfied and confident with their invention, two men, and I am so sorry, I do have a French-Canadian last name, however, I do not know French, or Swedish, or Danish for that reason, or for that matter, so just a heads up for the rest of this episode. Okay. Two men.
I apologize in advance.
I apologize. My apologies. Jean-François Pelletier de Rosière and François Laurent Marquis of Ardelans climbed aboard the Montgolfier balloon and took to the skies. And then, in that moment, the dream of human flight had become a reality.
Oh, Laurent is Al's last name.
Maybe they're
related.
You could be marrying into royal blood.
Wow. I'll have to do a DNA test.
Yeah. It's like, did you know your great something was the first person in the air via hot air balloon?
After the ducks and the chickens.
Well, the first person. Human. Yeah. Okay. From there, balloon fever spread throughout the globe. George Washington observed the first North American balloon flight. Balloons were sent into war to be used as methods for spying and for communication reasons.
Spying in a hot air balloon.
Yeah, super
Don't
covert.
mind us.
Don't look up there. It's a
What's
slow-moving
It's
giant.
a bird, it's a plane. It's a giant hot air balloon with people with binoculars from other countries.
I didn't even think about that. That's so funny. Okay. They were the subject of stories and publications, most notably Jules Verne's Around the World in 80 Days, and they were considered as a potentially realistic method of widespread travel. There were shifts and changes to the practices of flying them, with hot air versus hydrogen gas, but by and large, ballooning was the it girl of the time. Andre went on to discuss the details of his proposed expedition via balloon, down to the description of the balloon itself, his proposed route, the scientific instruments, supplies, and gear he would need, and the support crew he would require, both for the initial build of the balloon and for the expedition itself. And it was not going to be cheap. Various members of the crowd who were Arctic explorers themselves objected to his proposal almost immediately, pointing to the holes in his plan and the potential issues that may arise. This was a new method to explore an unpredictable and not fully understood place, and although he was only recruiting 2 other team members to accompany him on the actual expedition, concerns were raised at the lives that he was putting on the line with such a preposterous idea. Andre listened and took notes of their apprehensions before standing up and pointing right at General Adolphus Greely, an American explorer who had lost 18 of his 25 men in an Arctic expedition of his own 10 years earlier. And he said, "When something happens to your ships, how did you get back? I risked 3 lives in what you call a foolhardy attempt, and you risked how many? A shipload." Witnesses to his presentation noted that he left the stage in what we would refer to today as a mic drop moment, and the audience erupted in applause. The guy had confidence, and it showed. Although that confidence would later result in tragedy, for the time being, it won over the group, and he received full funding for his expedition, and he was off to the skies. So let's talk a little bit about who this guy is and how he ended up having such a unique idea.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm very intrigued. I mean, you preface this that this probably isn't going to go well, so I'm very intrigued on why this was the choice.
He is crazy about balloons, this guy. I'll just say that. He loves a balloon.
I mean, hot air balloons are pretty cool, but...
I've only been in one once, and it was pretty cool because it was over Egypt. But, like, I'm good now, I think.
It's like one and done.
Yep. It's like, I don't know if I need to see things.
I'm good.
From that way. Andre was born in southern Sweden, about 300 miles south of Stockholm in 1854. Growing up, he was known for his intelligence, his tendency to ask hard-hitting questions, and his stubbornness. He was extremely close to his mother, especially following his father's death when Andre was just 16 years old. That same year, he began attending the Royal Institute of Technology and dove into his studies. He graduated with a degree in mathematical engineering and shortly thereafter, at the age of 22, embarked on a journey that would change his life forever. He boarded a steamer to America in hopes of seeing the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia, a World's Fair, the first held in the United States, to showcase all of the various industrial, scientific, and cultural achievements of various nations across the globe. And I had to make note here, Cassie actually covered not this particular World's Fair, but one of the World's Fair in your episode about the segment of General Noble, a giant sequoia, that was put on display in the 1893 Chicago World's Fair.
Yes, that was an episode I did a while ago, but the World's Fairs were really interesting, and they're kind of a fun part of history.
Yeah, and I looked it up, tying into if you miss us and you want to hear an episode next week, you can go back. It's episode 160.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I say fun part of history, but there's also some pretty dark parts of history with the World Fair, but very interesting.
Yeah. Maybe I should listen to it because I kind of forget, but I do know that there was a tree involved and people thought it was fake. Because they couldn't believe that trees could be that big.
Yeah. It was before people were heading west easily.
Mm-hmm. On his journey to America, Andre had brought a book titled Laws of the Wind, and while reading was inspired. Perhaps winds could be used to carry balloons for long journeys. Once in America, he gained employment as a janitor at the Swedish Pavilion, but when not at work, he sought out visits with John Wise, a Philadelphia resident and pioneer in the balloon industry. He had been working with and building them since before Andre was born, and had developed the first balloon to carry mail in 1859. In time, he became a mentor for Andre, who absorbed all the knowledge that he could for him. Andre eventually returned to Sweden and opened a machine shop. It didn't last long, and within a couple years, Andre grew tired of the business and was heavily in debt. He was frustrated that the work kept him from his true passions, stating, quote, "The constant striving for money killed interests which I valued very highly and which I wanted to keep alive."
Speaking to the choir, man.
I know. It's like we all can relate to that.
We all feel that.
He worked a couple of other odd jobs before catching a break when he landed a job as a data collector as a member of the Swedish delegation of the first International Polar Year. And this was a scientific expedition to Spitsbergen in the Arctic, undertaken by 11 countries with the goal of studying polar weather. Not only did he get to travel to the Arctic, but his work, his resourcefulness, and his observations made him stand out amongst this group. Everyone thought his work was really exemplary, and they took notice of him. He began making a name for himself in the scientific community, and was not happy about having to return back to work after the expedition was over. But his fire had been lit, and he was making big plans for a trans-Arctic expedition of his very own. He didn't climb aboard a balloon himself until 1892 at the age of 38, and he found himself right at home. After making several more flights with other people, bolstered by his newfound credibility earned on that first International Polar Year expedition, and backed by an elaborate plan aimed to not only further science, but also the public good, he secured funding for his very first balloon, which he dubbed Svea. He conducted 9 test flights, covering roughly 900 miles over 40 hours, testing the maneuverability of the balloon, the elevation he could reach, and the use of ropes, and he even dropped messages and instructed the finders of them, wherever they picked up the messages, to send him a note where they ended up picking it up so he could track the exact route that he was actually going in the skies.
Interesting.
He deemed his test runs a success, but the Svea would not be suitable for his grand journey to the pole. In fact, the North Pole wasn't even his primary interest. One of the factors that set him apart from other men of the time who had intentions of reaching the North Pole or the South Pole or any place really that has yet to be charted was Andre was an engineer, not a rugged outdoorsman, yet he set his sights on that location primarily because it attracted attention, and attention yielded money. Money which would prove his true ambition, which was to prove balloons could sail to places that otherwise could not be reached. So he's like, I don't even really care where we go. I just need to show the world that travel via balloon is feasible and doable and is something that has a future.
Right. And he wants the money and the fame from being the person who discovers that.
And the geographic North Pole is something that everyone's vying for. So there's like this big competition to get there. So he's like, okay,
sense.
I guess we'll go there.
I'm personally happy that this doesn't take off for people. I mean, imagine if instead of flying in a plane, everyone hopped in balloons, like giant balloons that didn't have any cover.
I mean, I think eventually we would have moved away, even if this was successful.
Just hot air balloons are the hot air balloons, and blimps. Blimps are the way of travel. You're just
slow and steady
through the air for weeks to get somewhere.
I don't know. I hate to say this because we're recording early and God knows what is going to unfold in the future, but plane travel isn't doing so well right now either. So
you don't say that.
You don't say that.
So.
Okay.
All right, let's be real. We've all been there. You're out with friends, everyone's enjoying a drink, and you're standing there with your sparkling water trying to be social, but also kind of wishing you had something with a little more vibe. Sounds familiar? Whether you're cutting back on alcohol or just avoiding it, sometimes you need something that feels like a treat but doesn't come with a hangover the next day. That's where Sol's out-of-office THC beverages come in. These drinks are your perfect replacement when you're not in the mood for booze but still want to sip on something refreshing and fun. This podcast is sponsored by Sol, and if you've heard me rave about their out-of-office gummies, you're going to love their new THC beverages. Seriously, I had one of Sol's out-of-office drinks last night, raspberry lemonade to be exact, and it was amazing. It's the kind of drink that gives you that vacation vibe without, sending you off into another dimension. Just that perfect, warm, fuzzy, euphoric feeling like you're laying in a hammock on the beach, but you're still fully functional. Sol's out-of-office beverages comes in 2 mouth-watering flavors, raspberry lemonade and cucumber melon lime, and offer 2 different THC doses, 2.5 milligrams and 5 milligrams. Plus, you can buy them in packs of 6, 12, or 24, so you've got plenty to share at your next hangout, or let's be real, just to have a stash for yourself. I love Sol's out-of-office beverages because they give me the chance to kick back without overdoing it. I decided to ditch the alcohol hangover for a better vibe, and honestly, these drinks are a hit in my house. They've got all the chill without the next day. Sol was founded by Mike and Angie Lee, a brother-sister duo who wanted to create natural alternatives to things like anxiety, sleeplessness, and pain. And I love that all their products are organic, grown right here in the USA, and gluten-free. So if you want to feel your best, head to getsol.com and use code NPAD for 30% off your order. That's 30% off your order using code NPAD. One last time, getsol.com and code NPAD for 30% off.
When his idea for balloon travel first struck him aboard the ship en route to America, his original thought was to fly across the Atlantic, but no one was too interested in that. Rather, going to the North Pole, one of the world's last unvisited places, aboard a balloon that had never been used in that way before, now that was interesting, and that would secure funding.
It is interesting.
Circling back to the talk that he gave at both the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences and the 6th International Geographic Congress a year later, he presented his case. Aside from what I previously mentioned, he added that Arctic summer weather would provide the ideal window for the expedition, as round-the-clock sun would be ideal for scientific observation. If he was successful, it would be revolutionary for travel, would allow mapping the North Pole by aerial photography yet to be attempted, would acquire a greater knowledge of the geographical region than would otherwise be obtained in centuries, would make leaps in the current understanding of the natural world, and probably most enticing to funders, would mark him and his team, for Sweden, the country of Sweden, the first documented people to reach the North Pole. And that's kind of what a lot of people cared about. Andre may have been the balloon expert in Sweden, but other leaders in the field from places such as Germany and France were doubtful and skeptical of his methods and plan. In the end, his presentations worked, and his proposal was approved. The new balloon, dubbed the Ornen, or the Eagle, was built in Paris by hand from layers and layers of varnished silk, and was largely funded by Alfred Nobel from the Nobel Prize, and by Oscar II, King of Sweden, who was very, very excited at the potential of a Swede to be the first at the top of the world. Funding was quickly allocated to the balloon build, supplies, and gear. The balloon itself was about 100 feet tall and 70 feet in diameter, designed to fit 3 men and all of their gear and instruments, food, supplies, emergency equipment, and even small beds. In all, it was about 6,000 pounds fully loaded. In the summer of 1896, after nearly a year of planning, Andre waved goodbye to Sweden, who had all eyes on this expedition, and sailed for Danskoya, or Danish Island, within the Svalbard archipelago of Norway. With him were 47-year-old Niels Ekholm, a meteorologist who led the first International Polar Year expedition, so he was actually Andre's boss on that first expedition that they took years prior.
Gotcha.
And with them, Nils Strindberg. So there's two Nils right now at the moment. So I'll be going by last names to make it a little easier. And Strindberg was a 23-year-old assistant professor of physics. They were selected from a large pool of eager, qualified candidates for these coveted spots alongside Andre. Once at the island, a hydrogen plant and a 5-story balloon house had been constructed as a means to fill the balloon without interference from the wind. When it was ready for liftoff, the front wall of this 5-story building would be torn down to allow the balloon to take off. Once they arrived, it was a waiting game. The conditions had to be perfect, and the winds had to be blowing just right in order for them to begin their journey. So they waited, and waited, and waited. And during that time, Ekholm conducted tests of his own on the balloon, and his conclusions were very worrisome. Based on his calculations, the balloon would only be able to stay afloat for 17 days, not the 30 that the expedition required. Despite efforts to stave off any leaks, the balloon had been hand-stitched, and there were millions of tiny puncture holes during the stitching of the silk panels during construction, and all of those added up accumulated to a significant amount of gas escaping. For nearly 3 weeks, the group awaited favorable conditions, but none came. Their seasonal window had closed, and Andre reluctantly announced that the expedition would be delayed an entire year. Ekholm's doubt that the balloon could retain sufficient hydrogen to make the length of the trip only worsened on their boat ride back to Sweden. The hydrogen plant's chief engineer informed Ekholm that he had witnessed Andre secretively refilling the balloon. And this served as the nail in the coffin for Ekholm and only worsened his already deep concern, because this proved that the balloon was even less capable than he had originally thought.
Because he was basing his findings off of not knowing that he was secretly refilling these. Why would you do that either? This is your expedition and you're sabotaging yourself.
It's like you're setting yourself up for some trouble.
And the people you're going with.
Right. Ekholm confronted Andre about this and essentially gave him an ultimatum: get a new balloon or find somebody else. Back in Sweden, the public, who had been really eagerly anticipating this extraordinary expedition, almost immediately lost faith and interest in the venture. Andre spent the following months torn between scrapping the entire plan or trying again the following summer. Based on archival newspaper accounts, it was apparent that there was an immense pressure for him to try again. This was Sweden's first true and only attempt to the North Pole. Sponsors were likely pressuring him a lot, and, like the media and the country was kind of like, oh, you're backing out? Like, what's going on? Ultimately, he wasn't ready to give up, and he decided to try again. Refusing to invest in another balloon, Ekholm was replaced by 27-year-old civil engineer and avid outdoorsman Knut Frankel. In the spring of 1897, Andre's mother died unexpectedly, and that sent him into a spiral of grief. Although he presented differently, he was destroyed by her passing, writing, quote, "The only thread which bound me to the wish to live is cut off." He had no family of his own and would intentionally distance himself from anyone that he began developing feelings for, once stating, quote, "I don't want to run the risk of having a wife to ask me with tears to desist from my flights, because at that moment, my affection for her, no matter how strong, would be so dead that nothing could call it to life again." So this expedition was his everything. Both his parents are gone. He has no other siblings, and he has no romantic partner or real interest in getting one, because he doesn't want anyone interfering with his passion for balloons.
Yeah, he's really putting his all into this.
So a year has gone by at this point, and they're back to the island. It was May, and they were delighted to see that the balloon house and the hydrogen plant had fared well in the weather and that the wind conditions were now in their favor. Strindberg penned a letter to his brother saying in part, quote, "With a fairly strong wind, we will reach the pole, or a point near it, in 30 to 60 hours. Once having reached the northernmost point, we don't care where the wind takes us. Of course, we would rather land in Alaska, near the Mackenzie River, where we would very likely meet American whalers who are favorably disposed towards the expedition. It would really be a glorious thing to succeed so well. But even if we were obliged to leave the balloon and proceed over the ice, we shouldn't consider ourselves lost. We have sledges and provisions for 4 months, guns and ammunition, hence are just as well equipped as any other expedition as far as that is concerned. I would not object to such a trip."
Okay, so they're prepared
Yes.
to be stuck there for a while.
Yeah, they have emergency supplies. And
Like, this could be
expedition
60 hours,
is
this could be 4 months.
right, yeah.
It's a surprise.
So they're really well prepared in that regard. On July 11th, Andre sent a telegram to King Oscar II and the Swedish newspaper that purchased the press rights to the expedition, indicating their departure. Ground crew unleashed the tethers, releasing the Eagle and its 3 occupants into the sky, kind of. As it was leaving the balloon house, it struck something, and the last thing Andre was heard to say was, "What was that?" before the balloon drifted away into the sky, rising 300 feet into the air before rapidly descending, to the point where the basket was striking the water. The weight of the basket and the inadequate lift being generated by the balloon caused it to plummet. Onlookers watched as the trio tossed 9 bags of sand, roughly 450 pounds worth, over the sides of the basket and into the ocean. Wind gusts pushed the balloon further out over the sea, still dangerously close to the choppy waters below. In the chaos, 2 of the 3 steer ropes were torn free, which was a bad thing in the long run, but kind of a good thing in the immediate, because it gave a much-needed buoyancy to the balloon. But it wasn't enough. The men, realizing their predicament, started throwing off more items, including heavy gear, in a desperate attempt to gain altitude. Within the first minutes of this expedition, they tossed nearly 1,700 pounds worth of weight, and they rose nearly 2,300 feet into the sky, which was another problem, because now they were way too high. The intended plan was to hover at an altitude somewhere around 820 feet, below the clouds, but above the fog. At this higher altitude, there was greater atmospheric pressure. The hydrogen was escaping at an even higher rate. So after some more adjustments, they finally got it right, and traveling at about 20 miles an hour, their balloon traveled into the horizon until onlookers only saw a tiny speck in the sky before they disappeared from sight.
I have so many questions. Why would you continue? You're still in safety. Your people are right there. You know, you just threw out half of your provisions, maybe more. And then you're like, that's fine. We're just going to go for it.
30 to 60 hours.
Like, what? Right? Just new balloon, new try. Sorry, that sucked, but
just imagine they're like up, down, up, down. They're almost in the water. They're way up there.
I'm sick just thinking about it. Motion sickness. No, this is like, I feel like that was a bad omen from the beginning. I don't even know where this is going. I know it's not somewhere good, but I feel like that was a bad omen of, hey, maybe this is the universe telling you this is not a good idea.
Well, we say it all the time, and especially, you know, like if something doesn't start feeling, if something is difficult to do, not saying don't do it because life is difficult and you have to face things, but there are certain times where there are indicators, and like you said, it's the universe saying either like, hey, pay attention to this, or maybe adjust something, or like listen to the signs of
revise
like in
your
this
plan.
One,
this isn't the right way to go about this.
You know, it's like it was delayed. One of your boss and an expedition prior who is extremely knowledgeable is saying, hey, this is really not good, to the point that I don't even want to be involved because I'm so worried that this is not going to be good. And like there's just all of these little things that are like, hey, maybe hold off and readjust. But they didn't, and off they went.
This episode is brought to you by IQ Bar, our exclusive snack sponsor. IQ Bar is the better-for-you, plant protein-based snack made with brain-boosting nutrients to refuel, nourish, and satisfy hunger without the sugar crash. As someone who spends a lot of time outdoors, whether it's hiking, biking, or just exploring nature, I know the importance of fueling my body with the right kind of energy. That's why I love IQ Bar. These plant protein bars are packed with high-quality ingredients that help me keep physically and mentally fit. They're gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, and free of artificial sweeteners. It's the kind of snack I can feel good about. What's even better, IQ Bar comes in 9 delicious flavors like mint chocolate chip, chocolate sea salt, and lemon blueberry, so I never get bored. Whether I'm on the trail or just need a quick pick-me-up between adventures, IQ Bar is the perfect snack to keep me going. With over 20,000 5-star reviews and counting, more people than ever are starting their days on the right foot with IQ Bar's brain and body boosting bars, hydration mixes, and mushroom coffees. What I really love about IQ Bar is the variety of options they offer. Not only do they have these amazing plant protein bars, but they also have their hydration mixes and mushroom coffees, which are perfect for keeping me energized throughout the day. Whether I'm looking for a quick snack with the protein bars, need a little extra boost from their hydration mixes, or want a coffee that's packed with healthy ingredients, IQ Bar has me covered. And right now, IQ Bar is offering our special podcast listeners 20% off all IQ Bar products. Plus, get free shipping. To get your 20% off, text PARK to 64,000. Text PARK to 64,000. That's PARK to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details.
Conditions studied for a time. All 3 men kept detailed journals intended to be logs for their various observations, to record data points on weather events, but they also served to capture their feelings and day-to-day routines. That first night, Andre, who kept the most detailed diaries, wrote how wonderful that first night was, remarking, quote, "The snow on the ice, a light, dirty yellow across great expanses. The fur of the polar bear has the same color. Pleasant feelings prevail." The following morning, they had coffee as they traveled through the mist as temperatures hung right above freezing. By the afternoon, the fog thickened and the basket repeatedly bumped onto the ice. They're kind
barely
of
above. Yeah.
Yeah. Despite the literal ups and downs, into the air, then slamming onto the ice, spirits were still relatively high. But by the following evening, Strindberg was seasick, and none of the men had gotten any rest. They elected to throw more ballast out to raise the balloon, which rose about 100 feet, and while doing so, a large polar bear swam directly below them. To evade the rope guidelines dangling onto the ground, the animal took off running once he got up and onto the ice. The rising and falling of the balloon was impossible to gain steady control of. They were reluctant to keep throwing out important items, and to make matters worse, the balloon was starting to develop a coating of ice, weighing it down even more. On the morning of July 14th, they decided enough was enough. Disappointed and exhausted, the men jumped out of the balloon, which had made a soft landing after being afloat for nearly 66 hours and which had traveled 517 miles, but in reality, only about 300 miles from where they first started. With no way to refill the balloon, they shifted gears. They had landed amidst hundreds of miles of ice, broken into large blocks, which were being forced together by the current. They took a week to regroup and to take stock of their remaining gear and supplies. Despite having to ditch some of it, they were still pretty well off. They had guns, ammo, 2 large sleds, snowshoes, a boat frame, food, tents, and they also had several carrier pigeons. The men were under the impression, given how rough of a takeoff that they had just had a couple days prior, that a rescue operation was likely already underway for them. They're like, everyone saw that, right?
Like that didn't go well. They must know that this was dumb and they're going to come get us.
But for extra insurance, the birds were all sent out with messages containing detailed information as to their exact location and detailed information as far as longitude and latitude readings and the day and, just pertinent information like that. They also had a camera, especially equipped with a water and weatherproof case to document their journey. And it was decided that they would head southeast towards one of the 2 cache locations that they had prearranged. This one, off Franz Josef Land, an archipelago in Russia, and would stay put there until rescue arrived. The 2 sledges, both weighing roughly 450 pounds, were difficult to pull. They would all grab ropes and haul one a distance before stopping and going back to repeat the process with the other one. They would have to build bridges between ice floes, navigate the uneven surfaces, use axes to make tracks in the ice and snow for the sledges, and at times had to pull the sledges and themselves out of the frigid water when the ice gave way.
So much for not wanting to be in the outdoors. It's like, I'm not really that into the outdoors. I just want money. And now you're full-on expedition surviving in the Arctic.
Yep. For the time being, the temperatures were forgiving, typically hovering around 32 degrees, but the progress they were making was very slow. Banking 3 miles a day was a fantastic day.
Oof.
Like the best day that I had.
That's rough travel.
They did have food, but in attempts to ration it, supplemented their diets by hunting. Anything that they could find and shoot, they did. Seals, walruses, and polar bears were killed and consumed along the way. Journal entries detailed their creations with this food, including blood pancakes made of bear blood mixed with oatmeal, which was then fried in butter, or algae soup made from whatever algae was found clinging to the ice floes mixed with melted snow. Despite the difficulties, Strindberg wrote to his fiancée, Anna Charlier, in his journal, saying, quote, "We have just stopped for the day after judging and pulling the sledges for 10 hours. I am really rather tired, but must first chat a little. First and foremost, I must congratulate you, for this is your birthday. Oh, how I wish I could tell you now that I am in excellent health and that you need not fear for us all. We are sure to come home by and by." He and Anna had gotten engaged the autumn before their departure. Originally bonding over their love of music, Anna was Strindberg's great love. He carried a small heart-shaped locket with her portrait and a lock of her hair around his neck, and a photo of her in his pocket with him at all times on his journey. And he wrote to her frequently in his journal, although he had nowhere to post his letters.
This makes me want to start a fight with Al.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm like,
I want to fight Al.
Did you want to, are you going to put a lock of my hair around your neck? Or is there a photo of me in your pocket? Or do you have a locket with me in it? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, well, I will definitely back you up.
Thank you.
Romance is dead, everyone.
Why doesn't anyone do this anymore?
After a week of struggle, including issues with snowblindness and bowel issues, they made the decision to ditch some of the weight hampering their progress. Days later, they made a very discouraging discovery. Using astronomical measurements and the movement of the ice, they calculated that they had drifted west with the ice further than their progress to the east. So they're basically walking in place. By August 4th, unable to beat the movement of the ice, they had given up their journey of walking east and decided instead to head southwest to the other cache that was located in the northernmost regions of the Svalbard archipelago. So think of it kind of like a triangle. So they were at the top of the triangle where they crash landed, and then going down to the 2 lower points of the triangle is a cache each. So they decided to go to one. It wasn't working. So they're going to backtrack and go to the other point.
Okay.
I know it's kind of confusing, but they're just TLDR, it ain't working and they have to try something else. The going got tougher and they were growing weaker and colder as the temperatures dropped. Food was becoming scarcer and at times they resorted to eating polar bear meat raw. By the end of the month, Frankel had injured his knee, was experiencing bad bouts of diarrhea and stomach pains, and was being treated with morphine and opium. August bled into September, and morale was still high despite the challenges, and the men continued to document the wonder that they witnessed alongside the struggles that they faced. However, a September 17th journal entry by Andre noted how things had changed. They had found that they had traveled 81 miles southeast when they were trying for southwest.
Why do they keep going in the wrong direction?
It's a combination of them fighting the current because they're on ice floes. They're on giant, so there's that they're battling, and they're based on historical reflection on their entries and their calculations and stuff, they were slightly off. So that contributed to all of this as well. It was now impossible for them to reach the cache in time, and wintering on the ice was now a reality that they had to face. With plans of hunkering down until spring, they built a house on the ice by heaping up snow and pouring water over it, and moved their belongings inside. They had hopes that perhaps they'd have a chance of getting rescued early from maybe a passing whaler or whaling or fishing vessel, but that was quickly dashed when the ice below their hut began breaking. Less than a week after building the ice house, the large ice floe fractured beneath their hut, sending the hut and their belongings plunging into the water. The trio managed to retrieve a majority of what was swept away and began building another hut when they noticed some birds flying towards a distant island. The island, Katoya, or White Island, was normally really difficult to access because it's really remote and it's typically surrounded by a very thick belt of polar ice and surrounded by large ice floes. The island itself is so named because it's mostly covered with thick layers of ice, but the trio spotted a narrow strip of exposed land and made a move for it. Under the brilliance of the northern lights, they moved ashore and set up camp, which they dubbed Mina Andre's Place in memory of Andre's mother. Friday, October 8th, Andre made a note of the poor weather that day, which forced them to stay inside, but commented on how they were all happy to be on land versus the drifting ice. He also stated when the weather let up, they would go off to harvest driftwood and whale bones, and it was the last entry he ever penned. Fast forward 33 years. A Norwegian ship dubbed the Brattevåg was sailing the Arctic Ocean on a part scientific, part sealing mission during an unseasonably warm summer. The ship pulled up to the island of Katoya, normally inaccessible within the Svalbard archipelago, to take advantage of the abundant population of walruses on the island. Following animals around a strip of land on the southern tip of the island, some of the men had come back carrying a diary, heavy and logged with water, with, quote, "The Sledge Journey, 1897, legibly written on the first page." Intrigued, the scientific expedition leader, Dr. Gunnar Horn, and the ship's captain, Peter Alessian, rowed to shore. The pair met up with some of the crew members who were out on the island in search of fresh water when they discovered an aluminum lid, and continuing forward, a dark object sticking out from a nearby snowdrift. It was a canvas boat, and in it, a boat hook, stamped Andres Pol Exp, 1896. Continuing the sweep of the area, not far from the boat, they discovered a body leaning against a rock. The body was frozen, feet still in boots, but not much else remained other than bones of the torso and the arms. The head was missing, and clothing was scattered around the area, suggesting bears had likely disturbed the remains. Carefully opening what remained of the jacket, Horn revealed a large monogrammed A. 2 more sets of remains were soon located nearby, and what they had suspected became clear. They had just discovered the remains of S.A. Andre's expedition.
Wow. And so I have to ask, did anyone try and come rescue them after you had mentioned their takeoff was really bad, and then they had sent carrier pigeons and they had been waiting and thinking someone would rescue? Did anyone ever do that?
Yes, we'll get to that.
Okay. Okay, quick question. Have you ever stared at a wall of wine and thought, I have no idea what to pick? Because same. It's like a maze of labels, prices, and unfamiliar names, and let's be honest, you end up grabbing something random or just picking the one with the coolest label. Well, let me tell you a way better solution. Naked Wines. Forget the guessing game, now you can get award-winning wine delivered straight to your door without the headache. This podcast is sponsored by Naked Wines, and here's the thing. It's 2025. If you're still shopping for wine like it's 2005, it's time for an upgrade. Naked Wines connects you directly with independent winemakers, so you get award-winning wine delivered straight to your door. No middlemen, no markup, just amazing wine for a great price. Seriously, with my code NPAD, you can grab 6 bottles for just $39.99. That is a steal. How do they do it? Naked Wines cuts out the middleman and connects you directly to the winemakers, which means you're getting wine at up to 60% off what you pay in store. And the best part, these aren't just any wines. These are top-tier, handcrafted wines from the best independent winemakers out there. You're not skimping on quality here. I honestly love Naked Wines because each shipment gets better and better. Every bottle has been fantastic, and if you're into variety, it's perfect. I love both red and white wines to pair with dinner, so what I want to drink depends on what I'm eating. With Naked Wines, I get the best of both worlds without the hassle of trying to choose at the store. Plus, you can cancel or pause your orders at any time, so if you've got a vacation coming up, no worries. You can still enjoy Naked Wines before you take off. Now is the time to join the Naked Wines community. Head to nakedwines.com/NPAD, click enter voucher, and put in our code NPAD for both the code and password for 6 bottles of wine for just $39.99, with shipping included. That's $100 off your first 6 bottles at nakedwines.com/NPAD, and use the code and password NPAD for 6 bottles of wine for $39.99.
In the years between 1897 and it's literally the next sentence. In the years between 1897 and 1933, several searches had been conducted but produced nothing. Messages, either by pigeon or concealed in water buoys and sent off by the party, were not discovered until well after their disappearance and the discovery of their remains. So to be clear, they sent at least 4 passenger pigeons with messages, and only one was ever recovered, and it was much later.
Like the messages were never recovered?
The pigeons and the messages they were carrying. And then one of the pigeons that they had sent out was discovered on a fishing vessel. It landed on a fishing vessel, but it wasn't a distress message. That one just carried like, Andre's expedition, this date, here's our longitude and latitude, all is well.
Oh, okay. Those pigeons didn't do their job.
They probably died somewhere. But
they were like, it is cold up here. Why'd you bring us
Why am I in the Arctic?
Yeah, I'm a pigeon.
And then in case you haven't noticed, I'm a pigeon. And then the water buoys that they kind of like message in a bottle type thing. Some of them were discovered in like the 40s and 50s, like way after their bodies were discovered. So they didn't have much, they didn't help much. And in all likelihood, there are probably some messages that he had sent out, or he or one of the other men had sent out, that have yet to be discovered at all.
I dream of being one of those people who's just minding my own business, walking on a beach, and suddenly I see a bottle in the sand. And I'm like, what is this? I'll pick up this trash, and I pick it up, and there's this ancient letter in it, and I open it. And
it's a scroll. You're like,
it's a scroll, and it unveils the location of $2 million and a love letter.
Oh, you want treasure? Okay,
treasure,
the love
and
letter.
A love letter. Nice. Yeah.
That means we have to go to the beach. We're never on a beach.
I know. We never go to beaches. It's always freezing.
I know.
I guess technically Antarctica has beaches. Ice beaches. It's on the water.
The definition of a beach, I guess, will be on, but not. I just want to be warm at some point.
I don't know if it's even the definition of a beach, but
I think it is.
Is it?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be warm to be a beach.
That's true.
Okay. The expedition, which had gained national attention before, had turned into an international story once news broke that they were missing, and the headlines ran rampant, asking the same question in many different ways. Where is Andre? Following the discovery of the camp, further discoveries were made by other vessels shortly thereafter, and they recovered more artifacts from their expedition, including more logbooks and diaries, maps, clothing, medicine, tools, uneaten food rations, fuel, ammunition, and weapons, and over 40 rolls of camera film. All finds were handed over to the Scientific Commission of the Swedish and Norwegian governments for further analysis. Almost 33 years to the day of their last journal entries, on October 5th, 1930, escorted by 5 destroyers and 5 airplanes, the remains of the 3 explorers arrived in Stockholm on the same exact ship that had brought them to the island that they took off on their grand balloon expedition 33 years prior.
That's a somber full circle moment.
Yep. The procession passed through Norway and Denmark, and as the ship approached the harbor, more boats joined in, until nearly 200 of them trailed the vessel. They docked, and a procession of over 100,000 people gathered in what was later described as one of the most solemn and grandiose manifestations of national mourning that has ever occurred in Sweden. The 3 men placed in coffins were laid at the feet of King Gustav V, who proclaimed to the gathered crowd, quote, "In the name of the Swedish nation, I here greet the dust of the polar explorers who more than 3 decades ago left their native land to find an answer to questions of unparalleled difficulty." They were buried in the Northern Cemetery located outside of Stockholm, and a monument designed by one of Strindberg's brothers sits atop them. It is in the shape of a sail and the front of a ship cutting through water. Engraved on this sail is the route of the balloon's flight, the explorers walk on the ice, and a balloon with a dangling basket.
That's really nice.
The discovery of the camp, their 3 sets of remains, and the diaries found in 1930 was reported around the world, and the diaries were published with commentary as Andre's story. Over the years, stretching into present day, historians, scientists, medical professionals, and more have scoured their journals and studied all of the belongings left behind at camp for any indication as to what happened to them. Yet it still remains a mystery. Based on the locations and the conditions in which the 3 bodies were found, correlated and cross-referenced with their final journal entries, it was surmised that Strindberg was the first to die, and he was buried as best as they could figure out in the icy conditions. Just kind of had rocks, like it looked like he was intentionally buried, but just kind of haphazardly. His death was quickly followed by Frankel and finally Andre, who had the final entry in his journal on October 8th. But the order of their deaths and the true cause of them have been up for debate for decades. All of the final journal entries indicate no issues of fear, sickness, or injury. The main theory for decades was that the men perished from trichinosis, a parasitic disease caused by eating raw or undercooked meat from infected animals, and in their case, likely polar bear meat. Supporters of this theory point to the parasite's larvae found in parts of polar bear carcasses that were found at their campsite, and the diarrhea that they had experienced here and there. However, critics note that diarrhea hardly needs an explanation beyond their poor diet and their physical hardships that they had been going through. Plus, other telltale symptoms of trichinosis were missing in their accounts. So they're like, this could be contributed to anything, you know.
Okay. But people used to die from diarrhea. So even if it wasn't from this parasite, it could have been linked.
Mm-hmm. Vitamin A poisoning from eating polar bear liver was considered as well, but the diary entries reveal that they had been aware of the dangers of doing that and avoided it. Lead poisoning was thrown into the mix from the cans in which their food was stored, but a late 1990s lead test performed on a fingernail that was found in one of their gloves revealed to have a lot of lead, but not a sufficient amount to kill a person. Botulism, scurvy, and carbon monoxide poisoning were all considered before falling low on the list of possibilities. Of course, murder-suicide was considered, but that seemed pretty unlikely, especially due to the high spirits everyone's journals seemed to leave off on, and the ways in which they spoke of each other in their writings, which was consistently always positive, and they even commended and praised one another in their writings, basically saying, like, these are the best people I could be in this situation with, type of thing. There is the very realistic possibility that they had simply died as a lethal combination of general exhaustion, weakness, and hypothermia. Frustratingly, their bodies were cremated in 1930, so any possibility of exhuming them for analysis is impossible. As a result, most of these theories that I just mentioned were based on using the journal and diary entries as the chief primary sources pertaining to what could be learned about the fate of the expedition. Over 100 books were written in Sweden about what their fate was based off of this method of examining the case. However, someone came along and changed that. In the late 1990s, author and physician Bea Uusma was at a party and pulled a book off the shelf of the Andre expedition. And she was hooked on this story and this enduring mystery. And for the next 15 years, she thought of nothing else. She spent over a decade poring over every available fragment of evidence from the expedition, including each artifact, hard-to-get autopsy reports. She's a physician. She had some ins, so she got her hands on the original autopsy reports before they were cremated, as well as their journals. But this time, she examined everything through the lens of a forensic perspective. Rather than make speculations and claims, she let the evidence speak for itself. Strindberg's long johns were missing a leg, and his jacket and vest had slashes that cut through them. Frankel's body was discovered inside the tent without mittens or boots, with a partially used morphine bottle alongside him. Andre's body was located just outside of the tent, sitting in an upright position against a rock, a loaded rifle, and empty morphine and opium bottles beside him. Prior to his passing, he had ensured that he carefully wrapped his diary in a wool jumper and balloon cloth to protect it from the elements. In short, she put out a new theory: a polar bear attack. Surprise! This is a Tooth and Claw episode.
Wait, I'm confused because I thought it was going to go a different direction because you're saying they had morphine bottles next to them, and I thought it was going to be intentional. They all got sick of the weather.
Well, listen to this. So she thinks, and
polar bears gave them morphine.
Polar bears were like, hey, you gotta go. No, so she outlines all this in great detail, actually, in her book that she wrote after 15 years of studying. And it was published in 2014, and it is titled The Expedition: Solving the Mystery of a Polar Tragedy. And in very simplistic terms, she theorizes that Strindberg was attacked and killed by a polar bear. He's the one that had the leg missing on his long johns. He had slashes all through his clothing. And he was the one that was buried. So she thinks that he was attacked and killed by a polar bear. And during that attack, Frankel, who was the second to die, was possibly mortally injured in either helping him, trying to save him, whatever.
Okay.
And he appeared to have died very, very shortly thereafter inside of the tent. And he was the one that was wearing no shoes or mittens or anything like that. So perhaps Strindberg got attacked. He was in his tent, not prepared to be outside, and had run out and tried to help him. And then went back in the tent and died. And Andre would have then found himself on the island, unable to leave by himself. Perhaps the weight of his failed attempt for the pole, the tragic ends of his friends, and the arduous journey, and the lack of family to return to possibly led him to the decision to end his own life via morphine and opium overdose.
Okay. And then for the guy who was in the tent, if he was mortally injured, then potentially he was taking medication to try to help whatever pain he was in.
Yes.
Okay. That makes more sense. Yes. And it's realistic.
Because
they had food.
Again, yes. Them. They had enough food, rations, supplies, ammunition, etc., 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 to survive longer. It's not like they were running out of food.
How long had they been surviving for? I know you put dates, but...
Yeah, so this was... The last entry was October 8th, which they're guessing they died shortly thereafter, so early October, and the balloon took off on July 11th.
Okay. So they really weren't out there for super long, 3 months.
There are novels and film adaptations based on various interpretations of what some believe to have transpired on the expedition, along with various books about the journey based solely off historical events and the journal entries of Andre, Strindberg, and Frankel. There is also a museum whose collection is largely dedicated to this expedition. The Jenna Museum is located in Grana, Sweden, and showcases objects recovered from the campsite, along with dozens of photos from Strindberg's camera, which was salvaged 33 years later. So there are dozens of photos of them, like when their balloon crashed, or quote-unquote crashed, softly landed, and they got out. And their whole journey across the ice at their final campsite. There's some photos of them standing over a polar bear that they shot and killed. Like, there's a lot of documentation that is really, really well preserved. They have an extensive polar expedition collection to include not only objects and photographs from the doomed Andre expedition, but others as well. Notably, Sir Ernest Shackleton's photo album with a large number of expedition images, including the sinking of the Endurance in 1915. There is also a photo of Anna, Strindberg's fiancée, which was recovered alongside his remains. It shows a young woman, beaming with a smile, lounging in the grass with both hands behind her head, looking right into the camera. It is crumpled and weathered, and I know that is most likely due to its exposure to the elements for over 3 decades, but I would also like to think that it was worn out with love as Nils clutched it close in what would become the final months of his life. Anna was devastated by the disappearance of her fiancé. 9 years after he failed to return, Nils was officially declared deceased. 2 years later, so 11 years total after his disappearance, Anna married a British man and for the next 30 years split her time between the US and the UK. In 1930, when the bodies were recovered and brought back to Sweden, so too did all of the letters that Nils had written to her. They were delivered to her by Nils's brother, and it really hurts my heart to think of all of the emotions that she experienced when reading through his words, such as, quote, "It is strange to be sitting here again this year, thinking about how I am engaged to the most wonderful girl on earth, my dearest Anna. Yes, I may well shed a tear when I think about the happiness I have known, which may not be mine again."
That's so heartbreaking.
Anna died in 1949 at the age of 78, and just 2 years prior to her death, Nils's niece visited Anna in her home in England. Later reflecting on that visit, the niece said, quote, "Anna's husband, Gilbert Hawtrey, was a wonderful human being who tried in all possible ways to help his sorrow-ridden wife to forget. But it was all in vain. Anna could not forget. And forget she didn't. No matter what home Anna was in, she was always sure to hang a portrait of her late fiancé, and she was sure to communicate a very important final wish. She left specific instructions for her family concerning her wishes for her remains. She was to be buried next to her husband Gilbert, or he next to her, depending on who was to pass away first. However, prior to her burial, her heart was to be removed from her body and cremated separately. The cremains were to be placed in a small silver box and placed in the grave next to her lost love, Nils. On September 4th, 1949, the day Nils Strindberg would have turned 77, the joint grave of Andre, Frankel, and Strindberg was opened, and the silver box containing Anna's cremated heart was lovingly placed alongside him.
That's really beautiful. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, but it's really beautiful.
Yep.
And just shows, I mean, the whole story, you were talking about his love for her, but then to hear her love for him, that was reciprocated.
After her entire life goes by, it gives me Titanic vibes, you know, like,
yeah,
this great love that was just lost so soon. And, you know, their lives went on, they married, they, you know, lived out the rest of their time without ever truly forgetting and reserving a piece of their love and their heart for the one they love. So I think that was really, really special. So Danskoya, or Danish Island, the small island in which the fated balloon expedition lifted off from, and which the balloon house and the hydrogen plant were built, is right off the coast of Spitsbergen, the largest and the only permanently populated island of the Svalbard archipelago in northern Norway. Known as the wildlife capital of the Arctic, Spitsbergen has a vast, untouched landscape and low visitor numbers that create an idyllic sanctuary for a thriving, diverse range of wildlife. Around 65% of Spitsbergen has a protected status to include 6 national parks and 22 special protection areas. And Danskoya is now part of the Nordvest-Spitsbergen National Park.
And so there's the tie-in. I was going to ask you mid-episode, what does this have to do with a national park? But I had a feeling you were going to tie it in at the end because you do that a lot in episodes. So I was like, I'm just going to wait. And
let me cook, okay? Let me do my thing.
Yeah.
Established in 1973 to protect the environment against the growing interest of the mining industry, it's absolutely stunning. It has glaciers, islands, and large bays, Arctic tundra spotted with moss and lichen, and the park holds not only the remnants of the André expedition, but evidence of others as well, along with remains of various whaling stations. There is various expedition cruises led by naturalists, biologists, and geologists that run through the area and showcase the fjords, snow-capped mountains, and ice flows and glaciers of the park, which boast iconic Arctic species such as walrus, seals, polar bears, belugas, foxes, reindeers, and more. The park has also been identified as an important bird area, is a hibernating area for polar bears, and a hotspot for walrus colonies. It is also the location of the northernmost documented hot spring on Earth.
Ooh, that's cool.
Visiting the remnants of the expedition camp and memorial requires a permit from the governor, but on these various expedition cruises, I watched a lot of YouTube videos of people who have taken these expedition cruises up there and just their footage of being on the Zodiacs, and it actually got me really excited for our Antarctica trip. Because I know it's a different region and stuff, and we're not going to see polar bears, but just like all of their excitement for just like that type of environment and all of the different wildlife that they were seeing and all of that is really cool. Katoya Island, or White Island, where the remains of the 3 men and their expedition was found, is also accessible, ice conditions permitting, by expedition crews. The headland on the southwestern corner of the island has been named Andre Nesset in memory of this expedition, and there is a simple memorial stone erected there with the names of the 3 men who died there. In the first days of the expedition, with the balloon still high in the air, Andre wrote his thoughts. It is not a little strange to be floating here above the polar sea, the first to have floated here in a balloon. How soon, I wonder, shall we have successors? Shall we be thought mad, or will our example be followed? There is a very heated debate as to who was the first documented group to reach the North Pole, and when. It has been accepted that the American explorer Robert Peary's team laid claim to that feat in 1909. However, that was almost immediately contested. Another American explorer and former friend of Robert, Frederick Cook, contested it was actually he and his team to reach the North Pole first, a year prior in 1908. And to add more confusion to that, historians cannot with 100% certainty say that either team actually made it to the geographic North Pole on either of those expeditions.
Oh.
The first consistent, verified, and scientifically convincing attainment of the pole was on May 12th, 1926, by Norwegian explorer Roland Amundsen. And how he reached it, you ask? An airship. And that is the story of the Andre Arctic Balloon Expedition of 1897.
It ended up being an airship.
A blimp.
A blimp.
A balloon, if you will.
Is it me, or were blimps really popular when we were kids and now they don't exist? I mean, I'm sure they exist, but I never see them anymore.
Where were you seeing blimps all the time?
I feel like I used to see blimps all the time when I was a kid.
I remember the Goodyear one.
The Goodyear Hood. Hood had a blimp that was always up in the sky.
Really? I don't know.
I think. Right?
Oh, yeah. Like the milk
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like they got a bad rep when they like caught on fire and there was mass devastation and all that.
I don't know. Maybe it was a New England thing because I just Googled hood blimp and it said the hood blimp is a famous blimp that offers scenic views of the Massachusetts North Shore. So maybe I just saw them in New England a lot. I mean, you grew up in New England too, though.
Yeah. I don't know. It's not like I was like blimps were all over the place and now I never see them. But I feel like football games and stuff, weren't there usually blimps?
Yeah, always over the Super Bowl and stuff. There's always a blimp.
Yeah. Well,
everything says that they're too expensive, and it says, "Here's why you don't see blimps anymore." And this was written in 2024. Today's consensus is that there are about 25 blimps still in existence.
25?
So, yeah. So only about half of them are still in use for advertising purposes. It goes into the history of them, why you rarely see airships at all anymore. Only 128 people in the United States are qualified to fly airships, and only 17 of them are paid to do it full time.
What are you doing full time? Flying an airship. Where are you going?
I don't know. But I swear I saw them all the time when I was a kid, and now I haven't seen one in years.
Yeah, because there's only 25. That's why.
I'd like to see one again, just for nostalgic purposes.
Well, when you see them, you can think of the North Pole.
I will. Every time.
All right, that's it.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. It was really interesting. And it's very timely since we're doing our own South Pole exploration while this is airing, which is exciting. And
are you going to do the polar plunge?
I
feel like we should.
Gonna say no on my own. I can be peer pressured into it probably, and I feel like that's gonna happen. As I'm sitting here right now, I would say no, but also I know people are like, well, you're in the Antarctic, like where else are you gonna do it? It's like anywhere else. Anywhere that's like a little bit warmer. It's
or not
a
at
bucket all. Or not at all. It's not a bucket list thing of mine. I haven't been training for cold water plunges. It's not really my wheelhouse of things.
To me, I think it's just like I'm nervous of the shock to my system because I've done I'm not like I don't do ice baths all the time. I don't have like an at-home ice bath thing, but Natea got one, her husband got one, and when I was over, they were like, "Do you want to try it?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And they're like, Mike's hyping it up. He's like, you got like maybe 30 seconds and then, whatever. And he's like putting all the ice blocks in and making sure it gets down to temp. And I was really scared. And because I also hate being cold. Yeah. But I felt like I had to do it. So I did it. And I was in there for over 5 minutes.
You're like, this
is
nothing.
I don't know what. But it was very controlled. Like I could get in slowly and sit down.
You're not just jumping in. Well, if you can do that for 5 minutes, then you could probably do the polar plunge. I mean, I have done sauna, polar plunge type things.
Ice cold, ice hot, yeah.
Yeah. And that's been fun, but
there is a sauna available. They give you a shot. I don't really want the shot of vodka either. It's like, are you trying to kill me and then make me sick? I don't know if I'll take the shot of alcohol, but you go right into a sauna after. So
that is really nice. That's probably a safety thing.
Yeah, it's like you signed your life away, so we actually you can't do anything. Your family can't do anything, but yeah, I don't know. I think that I'll probably do it, and I'll peer pressure you as well.
I'm not peer pressured easily, but it can happen. So
I don't know. If it was just me, I wouldn't think you would say yes, but there's so many other people.
If it's you peer pressuring me, I would feel very comfortable saying no.
I also give up really easily. I'm like, hey, do you want to do this? And if someone's like,
you're not pushy,
I'm like, okay. Guess we're not doing it. All right, great. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Again, no new episode next week. We have to recover. from our own expedition. But we will be back the week after, and we'll see you then. In the meantime, enjoy the view.
But watch your back.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us again this week. If you love National Park After Dark and want to hear exclusive bonus stories, join us on Patreon or Apple subscriptions. Patreon subscribers have access to our National Park After Dark book club, live streams, Discord, and much more. If you prefer to watch our episodes, video episodes are now available on YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite listening platform. And to follow along with all our adventures, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and X at National Park After Dark.